The hardest part about divorcing an addict isn't the leaving. Everyone thinks it is. They think signing the papers is the mountain. It's not. The hardest part comes later. It's forgiving yourself for how long you stayed. When the dust settles, the questions start. Why did I put up with this? Why did I believe the promises? The 10th time, the 20th time. And if you have kids, the questions get even louder. I want to sit with you in that today because here's what I've learned. You stayed because hope is powerful. And addiction is the master of the almost better, the almost sober, the almost okay that kept pulling you back. You weren't foolish, you were hopeful. If you've been beating yourself up for staying too long, this one's for you. Let's walk through the guilt together and come out with a little more peace. Stay with me. My guest today is Amber Hollingsworth. Amber is an addictive recovery specialist with more than 20 years of experience helping people navigate the impact of addiction. While most of her work has centered on understanding addiction, she has also spent decades helping people heal from the emotional toll of living with addiction, including rebuilding their identity, restoring confidence in their judgment, and breaking unhealthy relationship patterns. Amber's advice helps people move beyond survival mode and create fulfilling and healthier lives. Welcome to the podcast, Amber.
Hi, thanks for having me, Rachel. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited for our conversation.
Yes, so happy to have you here. So let's jump into this and talk about how it is different to just leave a marriage in which you were married to someone who was an addict or versus healing from that marriage. And why is it so fundamentally different to heal from a marriage in which you were married to an addict?
I think one of the reasons why it's so big is because you constantly question your judgment and what happened. Because when you're in the relationship with the addicted person and you're trying to get them to address the problem, they're telling you either that it's not a problem and you're crazy, or that you're making a bigger deal about it than it is. And you really go back and forth in your own head about, no, he's wrong, this is definitely a problem, or she's wrong. And then you go back to, well, maybe I am overreacting, maybe I'm like making too big of a deal. And you go back and forth and back and forth. And there's a lot of defense mechanisms that go on with the addicted person. So there's like a lot of Darvo and gaslighting, and it leaves you constantly questioning yourself. And then when you do leave, you're always the villain, no matter how nicely you did it, no matter how fair you tried to be, no matter how you still care about them and want to support them. It's like, I can't believe you did this, because resentment and self-pity is sort of like the food and the fuel that addiction lives on. So when you're leaving someone that has that problem, immediately it's going to feed into their resentment and self-pity against you, and they're going to make you the villain. And it feels so frustrated to be seen in a way that doesn't feel accurate, and feels unfair.
So we're focusing on like how to switch off those survival patterns, right? And how to stop making assumptions about ourselves. We did that wrong. We should have done this. And that's really hard. But also there's the element of, I loved this person. I tried to help this person. So how do those two kind of butt heads when you're trying to get out of those patterns?
It's just so hard because you continue to question yourself over and over. And during the course of the relationship, you see these glimpses of them. And it's like, oh, there they are. They're right there. And you feel like that there's hope and headway. And then things go back. And then maybe they are better for 6 months. And then it goes back. And so you just never have this sense of like solid, where do I stand? Is this a problem? Are they going to get help? And so you feel confused all the time. And to add to that, just to put another layer on the top, not only is that going on in the dynamic of the relationship between you and this person, but also another thing that happens when you're addicted, because the spouse is almost always the villain, right? Because they're the first person to see the problem before anyone else sees it. And while that's going on, the addicted person will go around to the other people in your lives, the friends, the family members, the in-laws, and they're talking negatively about you to them. She's controlling, she's never satisfied, Nothing I do is good enough, all these things. And so you're not only getting that from the person, you're getting that from people around you who you may not even be aware that knew any of this stuff. And that the person, it's like a splitting behavior that happens, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
so there may have been times when you even went to some of these other people to ask them for help or to ask them to talk to, your partner or whatever. And because they beat you to the punch, when you go and you talk about this, you're actually reinforcing what they've said about you, which is you're controlling, you're critical, you're nagging, it's never good enough, you're overreacting, all these things. And they're becoming even more convinced of what they're being told by this other person. And so that just makes it 1,000 times harder, right? Because you question yourself. They're telling you you're the villain. Other people are looking at you like, how could you have done that? And it's just heartbreaking.
Yeah, that it sounds very much like leaving an abusive marriage in some ways. Similar, yeah, kind of those psychological mind games and making you feel smaller and making you question everything. But the fact of the person, that former spouse, making you out to be the one who was doing the wrong things to people that you love and care about that's got to be really hard. I mean, I can't even imagine. I think healing from divorce in general is just so hard, and to have those loved ones around you, if you need their guidance and just supporting you, and then to think that they have heard these things about you that make you sound crazy or make you sound irrational or whatever, insert adjective, must be really hard. So, how does one tell the difference between true love and a trauma bond in a marriage with a person who's an addict?
Well, any relationship's going to have trouble whether they're an addict or not, right? But relationships that are with, a somewhat healthy person who's either not an abuser or not an addict or something like that, um, can tolerate some honesty, can tolerate some distance in the relationship, some healthy boundaries. But trauma bonds really don't respect boundaries. It doesn't tolerate the truth. Trauma bond runs on intensity over safety and secrecy over honesty, right? It's about the fear of abandonment. And now we're just tied into this sort of sick, unhealthy pattern. And it's almost like similar to the way when you're addicted, the withdrawal cycle keeps you going back because it's like really good and then really awful, really good and then really awful. It's almost like addicted to the relationship for that same reason, right? Really good and then really awful. And it creates that addictive cycle that's going on that is different than regular love and attachment. Those ups and downs are extreme. And
Yeah.
that's what keeps you stuck.
So it seems to me there's obviously someone who's more of the controller, and then usually, that's the addict, and then the woman is the one who, well, assuming, I work mostly with women, so we're assuming the man is the addict and the woman is the one getting out of the marriage, and she is the one who has to not only try to calm things down and take care of things like she normally does, especially if there are children involved, but she also has to deal with being placed on this lower pedestal and being criticized and being made out to be like you said, the villain. So that's really hard. So when you leave that, when you get that courage up to leave that, my goodness, first of all, that is a courage.
Right.
And when you do that, I assume that that has got to be really hard if you don't have the right kind of support network.
Yeah, it's particularly hard if you're leaving what I would call, this isn't a clinical term, but we all kind of know what it means. Like if you're leaving someone that you would consider like a functional addict or alcoholic. And the reason that is because on the outside, everyone else thinks they're fine.
Mm.
And the spouse is the one that sees it because the spouse is, maybe they go to work, maybe they make a lot of money, maybe they function really well, but as the partner you see the aftermath and you see the consistency of the problems that are happening. Maybe the friends see somebody make a bad choice once or twice, but you see the big picture, and so you're the first one to see it, and when no one else sees it, it's just that much more frustrating. And I do want to go back to something you said, Rachel. You said the addict is the controller. I think the addiction controls the mood in the house. But the addict for sure would say that the spouse is the controller, because the adaptive response from the spouse is to try to control the situation. And what happens is they move into like a parent role, really, and they're trying to monitor all the time and check behind them and find the evidence, because they feel like this person won't admit it, and if I show the evidence to them, then they'll have to admit it and they'll have to get help. That's not the case. That's not the way that will play out. But you're stuck in this role because they're telling you you're crazy. So number one, you're trying to get them to admit it and to get help. And number two, you're trying to prove that you're not crazy.
Yeah.
And so
Wow.
you get even more invested in this, like detective role, where you're trying to control the money they have access to, control where they're going, control who they're with. You're trying to catch them doing whatever deceptive behavior, and you're in this cat and mouse game. So although I would say the addiction sort of controls the house, I would say the spouse gets into a attempt to control the situation, which just pushes both people further apart.
That makes total sense. So thank you for correcting that. And I forgot about that, because I remember from the episode I did on abusive marriages that it's like the disease, or whatever you want to call it, that's kind of trying to control and set down the boundaries. But yes, the woman is the one who, because by nature we are nurturing and we want to care for people. And so also, especially if you have children, I imagine, and you see this spouse that you're married to, and he's, extremely drunk or inebriated or whatever, and you want him to calm down because you don't want that to have an effect on the children. So it's got to be a really tough place to be in. And that brings me to my, oh, did you have something to add to that?
No, that's okay. We can move on.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Things to add. I get passionate about it.
No, go for it.
Well,
That's why you're here.
One of the other crazy frustrating things is when you have kids, there's never any good answer, but there's really no good answer when you have kids, because people are like, okay, if they're an addict or an alcoholic, leave them. You got to protect yourself and the kids. But now you're in a position to have to let your kids go every other weekend and stay with somebody who's addictively using the substance. And at least when you're with them, you're there to help run interference or manage or keep things safe. So it's like, is it safer for my kids for me to leave or stay? And you get in that rock and a hard place, and it's just so, yeah.
I think, and from a legal standpoint, just to add, because I was thinking of, I used to do some family law a long time ago. And here in California, the standard is the best interest of the child. So I think in a case like that, maybe if there was evidence brought forward that this was an addicted person, that the court would order supervised visitation. But there's some states that don't have that, and they'll side with the father. And that's really scary as a mom, like being a mom. If I was in that situation and had to let my kids go with my former partner, my former partner was not an addict, but if that was the case and I had to let my kids do that, oh my gosh, I think I would have appeared as a crazy person to anyone around me. So,
and that's part of that dynamic, which can play out in court too, because especially if this person is functional, and especially if it's alcohol and not drugs. With it, someone's using drugs, it's just a little easier to show that that's out of bounds. But when someone's using alcohol, which is really acceptable, if they're still functioning well on the outside, maybe that it's a problem, but you got to prove it, and how do you prove it? And then you get in that crazy making where you're trying to present the evidence. And the more you do that, the crazier you look. So even within the court system, it's like, see, she's crazy, again, you're in that villain role. So it's
really
a
tough
precarious position to be in.
It is. And it kind of, I wanted to ask you this next question, which really kind of ties into all of that. And that is, for these women who do leave the marriage, why do so many of them end up in a relationship with another addict?
A lot of times this comes from unhealed trauma. It's like if you leave any kind of relationship that, for whatever reasons, and you don't heal and change, because you think, well, it was just the addiction that caused all that. Well, maybe the addiction did cause most of the problems, but it changed you in the process, right? And changed how you see things. You can't help but be changed by it. And you're bringing that with you into your next relationships, and you don't realize that, but you play out those same roles subconsciously. You recreate the same situations. Like some people say, oh, maybe I just attract alcoholics or something. And I don't know, maybe there's some truth in that. But I think it's really more that you're bringing your own unhealed wounds into a
Yeah.
new situation. And then that dynamic sets up again because maybe you always rescued. Maybe you always overfunction. You see what I mean? And then it's automatically,
Yeah.
you're an overfunctioner. The other person moves into an underfunctioning role
Right.
automatically because it's just like the law of gravity or something. And so we don't know that we're doing that, but we do.
Yeah. Well, you nailed it when you said bringing the old wounds into the next relationship, and you talked about attracting. And this is the work that I do, not necessarily with the addicts, but the people that were married to addicts, but with anyone who's left a marriage, because no matter what, it's very hard to heal, even if both people, the husband and the wife, or two wives or whatever it is, even if they both agreed to that the marriage was the best case, it's still really hard because you're this bonded couple, and now you're all by yourself. And so there's a lot of healing that needs to be done. So when we, even outside of an addictive marriage, when you're married to an addict, no matter what, you have to look at past wounds, because a lot of times we bring that baggage from when we were children. Maybe we never dealt with it. So if you want to attract, we are mirrors, right? So if you want to attract somebody who is not an addict, who is healed, who is emotionally mature, who is, whatever the qualities that you want in a future partner, you have to first do the work, or you are going to attract that same person with a different name and a different face. And I say that all the time. So
Yeah, I
yeah.
would 100% agree with you, Rachel. And I would even go one step further. And it's if they're not that in the beginning, as far as you attracted them, you know, family systems are systems. If one person is one way, it creates a reaction in another person. And so you can create, not that you can make someone an addict, right? But you can create certain tendencies in another person, not even being aware that you're doing that.
Like
And it works
maybe.
both ways.
Right. And I think that has to just do with like the constitution of the individual. Like, are they a little bit weak? Are they easily, yeah, manipulated or whatever? So that's why, again, when you do this healing work and you figure out who you are as a person, and you heal your wounds, your past wounds, and you come to terms with them, and this can take a long time. I mean, I made a point I said, I'm not going to date for 2 years after my divorce. And I spent 2 years really focusing on me, who I am, what I want in the future, for myself, before I could even consider a partner. And by the time 2 years, right about before the 2 years was up, I made a list of all the qualities I wanted in a future partner. And I tell all my clients to do this. It doesn't matter if they're silly things. You just put everything on there, and eventually you kind of narrow it down. But I knew exactly what I needed my future partner, the things he had to have, the things that couldn't, I would not.
Non-negotiables
Non-negotiables, exactly. And I think you can't get there if you come out of an addictive relationship. You can say, like, I do not ever want to be with an addict again. But if you're not dealing with your own issues and why and how you got into that position, and maybe stayed for a long time in that position when you knew it wasn't serving you, you can't move forward into another relationship unless you address those things.
Right. And like you're saying, it's really not any different than any other kind of wound or healing that will replay out. It's
Right.
just another version of, right? Like let's say you really, really want a partner who you can rely on, right? Who you don't have to double check behind, who's responsible. But you've been the responsible one for so long, you don't realize it, but you don't even know how to let someone else have that role, right? It's like because you continue to do that because it's what you've always had to do. And that's what I mean when I say it can be, yes, that you attract a certain kind of person, but it can also be that the traits you bring into the relationship bring out certain traits of the other
Right.
person.
Well, that's why you need to find someone to help you work on, and because you may not even know what those things are. So healing is so individualized. Every person needs different ways to heal, and different things they need to do to really dive deep into themselves. And people are scared of that. But if you ever want a chance at that happiness and getting out of that, record playing over and over and over again, You do need to look at that. So when you come out of an addictive marriage, it's hard to, a marriage to an addict. There we go.
Yep.
When you come out of that, what does healthy detachment look like, especially when you have children in the picture?
I think healthy detachment means you stop letting yourself obsess about what they're doing and not doing, because the addict is addicted to whatever they're addicted to, gambling, pornography, drugs, whatever. And you get addicted to them trying to fix the situation, trying to control the situation, trying to find out what's happened. And you get just as obsessive about what mood are they going to come home in? Like, are they going to be drunk again? Are they going to do this again? Did they spend all our money again? You, as a protective mechanism, you get obsessive about them. And it's hard to let that go. Even after you're separated, you'll still find that you're still doing that. It's like you're trying to like temperature check all the time. You're trying to figure out what's really happening. And so it's almost like conquering an addiction yourself. It's about not letting your mind go down that rabbit hole. And a lot of times you have to sort of do some thought stopping, some conscious like distraction. You have to train yourself not to get preoccupied with that, because it becomes so ingrained in you that it is hard to stop. And so it's about, okay, less room for that, more room for everything else in life that you want to focus on or need to focus on or whatever, Yeah.
Right.
To me, that's what healthy detachment looks like.
Okay. It almost kind of goes along with rebuilding that self-trust, right? Is like to stop thinking about that person all the time, because there's nothing you can do for them. You can only do for you right now to help you. You're not in charge of them. They're not your project. They're not your burden anymore. Although
You
with
feel
kids,
guilty. It's hard
you
because
feel
you have this
guilty.
guilt. You feel guilty,
Yeah.
and so it's hard to let that go. Mm-hmm.
So to me, I think that just takes a lot of work into into again who you are, who you want to be, and bringing back that self-confidence and that trust, and realizing that I can let that go because I'm not him. He's not me, right?
And it's not my job to fix him.
Yeah.
And even if some things happen to him that I have real empathy for, maybe he had childhood trauma, and that's, the underlying factor in this addiction. That's what keeps you held hostage for so long, right? Like you can have understanding and empathy for someone, but not feel guilty. Because, and maybe this will help someone to hear, but you can never be first with an addict. At best you can be second, and that's even dicey because the addiction comes first, right? Like you get the leftovers, and there's no way to be the first and primary in someone's life who has addiction.
Wow, that is really a powerful statement. And thank you for saying that. I think that sums up a lot. And uh, there's a lot of self-forgiveness that needs to happen. Yeah. So have you worked with people as to, how to start that process to forgiving the self and what that might look like?
Yeah, I think a lot of it starts in the beginning with just, it's like what we were talking about before, not allowing yourself to obsess about it. Like at first, I think you just need to get some distance from it, some emotional distance from it. And then naturally you sort of come back to yourself, and you feel better about who you are. You feel better about what you're doing. You feel proud of yourself for some things. And then I think the forgiveness comes along naturally a lot of times in most cases, right?
Yeah. Yeah. The first big step is leaving, but then it is little baby steps after that. And learning to love yourself again, which comes from so many things like we talked about. Yeah.
No one leaves an addict like on relapse one, okay? Like if you've had to leave an addict, you had to leave. You tried everything. You tried more longer than you should have, and made yourself and everyone else crazy trying to do it. Like I promise you did not like walk out just because one thing. You married this supposed to be this person. You tried everything you knew. For you basically had to save yourself, or you're both gonna drown.
Right. And even making that decision is just huge. And I think the first thing that anyone, I would think, in that situation who leaves should recognize is their bravery in doing that. No matter how long it took, no matter how long they stayed and knew that they had to leave, it's actually doing that is so brave. And you can heal after that. You can do it. You just took a huge step in leaving. And so now you can heal. Is there anything else that you want to add for those who might be in these relationships with addicts, and or even for people who have left them and who are now doubting or having a hard time? What is there anything else you'd like to add?
If you are in a relationship now with someone who has addiction, there actually is a lot of things you can do. And most of my content is about that, how to help someone actually who has an addiction. There are absolutely things you can do. So if you're in that relationship and you're still trying, then be strategic about it, because just going off of what your gut's going to tell you to do is going to lead you very, very wrong, right? And you're going to be years and years of unhappiness. If you have you're out of that relationship, because what happens, because you have this mixed feelings and you do have this guilt, a lot of times people will say, well, how do I continue to support them in their recovery even though I'm divorcing them or even though I've left them? And I got to be honest with you, that's not really possible.
Yeah.
Because the fact that you're leaving them puts you in the villain role, and you, at that point, when you decide to leave, you have to you're deciding to save yourself, right? It's like,
right,
they're drowning, they're hanging on to you, and the question is are you going to go down with them? After you've tried all that stuff. And I would not continue to try. I mean, you can be kind, right? And you can be empathetic, but if you're still trying to fix them after you've left, which is what continues to go on, it's like you're still staying in that unhealthy, trauma bond cycle.
And you can't heal. But what if you do have the children, like we talked about, and they do have to spend time with both? So you do have to talk to that person occasionally about schedules or this and that. And does that just involve a lot of boundary setting? And if so, I assume someone needs to hold your hand and guide you, like walk you through how to do that the right way, so you don't get into this being pulled back in, right?
Yeah, and boundaries is a real key word. When you talk to people, anybody, they'll say you have to set boundaries with an addict. Okay, but most people don't really understand boundaries. They're really setting rules, right?
Yeah.
And they're not really boundaries, because boundaries doesn't have anything to do with what someone else will and won't do, right? The way I like to say it is, you can only build a fence around your backyard, and your neighbor's going to get real ticked off if you try to build a fence around their backyard, right? But we try to do that with addicts and alcoholics, or people that are out of control, right? So we try to set these boundaries, which are really just rules. And because probably that's gone on in that relationship for years and years and years beforehand, that will keep you two stuck in that cycle. So yes, there has to be some boundaries. I would make them around safety. You have to have boundaries around safety, especially for kids. But other than that, you probably will do better by just asking the person. Like I always say, everything doesn't have to be a boundary. Sometimes you can just have a request. And if you just have a request and you come at it, it's like you come at it, you feel like it's going to be a fight, so you come in ready to fight. I'm setting this boundary. And what you're doing is provoking more of a fight, right? So definitely you want to start with request. Boundary is kind of like the last straw.
Okay.
If that makes sense. And I know a lot of people say boundary is the first straw, but it just triggers the whole power struggle dynamic a lot of times.
That makes sense.
With your tone and your language. And guess what? You don't have to tell other people what your boundaries are. So even if you have them, we have this weird thing where you feel like we have to announce it to the person, but it just creates a fight. You don't even have to tell them what your boundary is, because like I said, a boundary doesn't have anything to do with them. So there's no need for you to have to tell them. Like, if maybe your boundary is, I don't answer phone calls from him after 5 o'clock, because I know after 5 he's going to have been drinking, he's going to be drunk, and I don't want to deal with that. You don't have to tell him. Like, don't say, don't call me after 5. That's a rule. Okay. Tell yourself, don't answer the phone after 5. That's a boundary. And you don't even have to tell them that's the case.
I like that. That makes so much sense to view it from that perspective and to treat it that way. It's something that's important to you, so you don't have to announce it, because that just pokes the bear, right? And you just eventually he's going to figure out, hey, when I call after 5, she doesn't pick up. He might be angry for a while, but I think eventually he might just stop calling after 5.
Yeah,
Hopefully.
and if he says, "Why don't you answer my calls?" You don't even have to tell him why.
Yeah,
You
that's
can
true.
just
You don't
say,
owe him an
"Oh, it's just
explanation.
a really busy time for me. You know, it's best to catch me in the afternoon." You because you're going to want to tell him because you're still going to be stuck in that. I'm trying to get him to see the problem. You got to
Yeah.
let that go and just say, evenings are just hard for me. If you really need me, easier to catch me
Mm-hmm.
at lunch or whatever, right? You
Right.
don't have to tell them because it just is going to start a fight. They're not going to get insightful. They're not going to wake up suddenly and figure this thing out because you said that.
Right. So I think the overall message here, underlying message, is that if you are coming out of a relationship, divorcing an addict, you probably should get some help because a lot of the things that we think we can do, if we look back over the course of the relationship, we loved that person, we wanted to help that person, but obviously we can't, we couldn't. That's why we left. And so we need to put ourselves first by working with somebody and learning how to do that. Because, like you said, when you're in that relationship, you can't be first because the addiction is first. So now you have to relearn. It's like a child learning to walk. You have to relearn. If you are divorced from an addict, or even especially just starting that healing journey, definitely get some help. Definitely get some help because like we both mentioned throughout this discussion, it's really hard to know what to do on your own, even though you think, okay, now I'm free, I'm gonna do it. But because you've been in a pattern for so long, or
Yeah,
multiple patterns,
right.
that's what's hard, and that's what's usually you can't get out of that yourself, and dealing with any kind of trauma from the past. So
Yeah. Love does
I
not heal everything. Okay.
yeah,
It really
that is
doesn't.
so true. So true. And I thank you so much for being here. This was so informative. And I hope that anyone who is healing from divorce and has been in a relationship with an addict has learned something today. Please, if you like what you heard, remember to subscribe. So we work on these kinds of things every week and trying to help you get through your healing journey. And if something made you think twice, please like or share. And thank you again so much for being here, Amber. It was a pleasure to have you.
Thanks for having me. Bye, everybody.